Teresa will begin the session. She's a professor of transportation engineering and planning at the University of Wisconsin. In addition to professor of transportation engineering and planning, Teresa Adams is director of the National Center for Freight and Infrastructure Research and Education and the Midwest Transportation Workforce Center, both at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Adams is also a chair of the Transportation Management and Policy Graduate Certification Program and a faculty affiliate of the Gaylord Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. Dr. Adams' research focuses on transportation infrastructure asset management. She holds a PhD and MS in civil engineering from Carnegie Mellon University and a BS in civil engineering from the University of Pittsburgh. Please help me welcome Teresa Adams.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here, and thank you all for coming to one of the last sessions of the conference. It's always a little stressful. So the first thing I gotta tell you is every day when I came to this place, I was dressed in a dress and everything, and I felt really overdressed. So last night, I went out and got the boots. All right, so, and then I have to wear the jeans. So I'm sticking with that story. All right, so I want to come and tell you some things about, some thinking about environmental thinking that I think I want to leave you with some of this thinking, and maybe it's going to help sort of tweak some ideas on innovation and what you're doing. So I called this Pavement Preservation for the Anthropocene. So who's heard of the Anthropocene? Okay, do you want to say what it is, or?
Earth's most recent geological time period.
Okay,
Is that right?
that's that. Okay, so Anthropocene, yes, it's so anthropology, and then the Pocene, that's the epic. Okay, and so the title of this and why we bring this up is sort of that this is really. Was an epic introduced by a Nobel laureate in 2000. All right, and the purpose we're using that, whether or not you actually believe it's a geologic epic, but the idea is that it's the age when human activity has changed the geology and the ecosystem of the planet. Okay, as evidenced by extinction of plants, species, the flooding we've had, melting of the polar ice caps, and some of those activities that we can then be able to relate them directly back to activities of the human. All right, so there's a little bit of controversy over it, whether or not it's actually changed geological and ecosystem. So obviously ecosystem stuff, there's a little bit of controversy over that of whether or not the geology's changed. And I think, okay, we've got, what are all those landfills we've created, okay? What is all that pollution that's, moving through our water system, our water table, and collecting in places that it wasn't before? And so to me, that feels like a little bit changing in geology. So we haven't moved any plates. Maybe we have, actually, with some of the fracking that we've done. Okay, so at any rate, to me, I've convinced myself that it's okay. So, heat waves, fires, floods, all these disasters make us painfully aware of the connection between what people are doing and our planet. Okay, so we'll start with where's our situation. Okay, we're very car-centric. Okay, road infrastructure, this is the US, road infrastructure, car ownership, oil consumption, climate change, transportation is accountable for about a third of the U.S. Greenhouse gases, air pollution, about half of the urban air pollution. All right, and so we can do things like our shared economy. You know what the shared economy is? Anybody heard of that? Okay, that's the car sharing kind of stuff. All right, so we might be able to handle some of that ownership and operations costs. It's ridiculous through car sharing. We might be able to control some of our infrastructure investment costs if we do more of the car sharing. So, but we still have lots and lots of problems. So one of the biggest ones is this impact of pollution. And I'm not just talking about air pollution, but it's the water and the soil pollution as well. And the impact on human health and human welfare in particular, I think we're all pretty familiar with the climate change, development impacts, and so on. So I want to kind of stick with a few of these that are a little bit more social, and kind of tell you a little bit what's going on. So first I'm going to say that it's not like we don't understand this. There are a lot of initiatives at the federal level to try to address some of these things, to try to change our thinking, to try to change the way working across the different agencies, that these are systems of systems, kind of a little bit more the systems approach, and how we can have federal leadership in some of these. So we have land use activities, multi-jurisdictional regulations that prevent or require more sustainability in the transportation. We have energy regulations, we've done lots to reduce the emissions on a lot of vehicles. We're doing some things in even our federal aviation and our culture of air transportation in this country, which is really our standard long distance travel is air transportation. And so we've done a lot to try to make that a little bit more sustainable. And so we've been successful, and through our air quality regulations, we've certainly reduced a lot of emissions, and that's despite the 150% increase in passenger miles traveled. All right, so we've done a lot from 1970 to the present, but all right, we still have a lot more to go. You can see that the challenges remain. These lines are really showing us some of the consumption of fuel consumption for the various types of transportation, and it continues to go up. All right, and so while we're reducing the emissions that's coming out of the use of that fuel, our consumption of the fuel is still going up. And so our dependence on fossil fuels continues to grow. About 30% of our energy use comes from petroleum, despite all our efforts with alternative fuel sources, and that we emit, which contributes to about 29% of the U.S. greenhouse gases. So a reality check on some of the strategies we're doing. The HOV lanes, they haven't really been very successful, despite demand management policies. So, and our conventional transit system isn't really working very well either. That all in all, while we're trying to sort of have this passenger vehicles, it still ends up being about the same greenhouse gas emissions per passenger as we do in our passenger cars. And that's just because you have to have a baseline of transit service in order to even have a transit service. And so it has to be there when people need it. And so until you can get the density of users, you're not really going to get the benefits of what we would think of as a transit system. So let's just talk about some of the sustainability trends. And sustainability is inevitable. Okay, it's going to come, it's going to change and influence our practices in transportation. And I want to try to help you understand a little bit how it might change and influence the practices in pavement, all right, and pavement management in general. So some of the sustainability goals, if you go and look at the literature or go to the state websites, and you can find out, some of their measures and goals and what we're trying to do: reduce waste, minimize energy use, preserve the soil, reduce accumulations of toxins, water, manage the water in the right of way so that we're not causing a lot of toxic runoff. And then, of course, the financial sustainability, which we talked about a little bit in the last session. And then institutionalizing sustainability as an agency value. And that's also one of the big things I want to talk about in this today. So some of the metrics that you see, all right, are really much more input-output metrics. They're not really outcome measures, as you might think, or what we would like to include. So how much solid waste we're producing, how much we're recycling, fuel use, all the things that you all are pretty familiar with. What I think we need to do is start adopting a little bit more of this cradle-to-cradle thinking. All right, and so you've all heard this. That book was out in 2002. How many of you read that book? The Cradle to Cradle? Okay, so Cradle to Cradle and Cradle to Cradle thinking is, the concept there is to eliminate waste, okay, not minimize it, all right? And so the idea is to model the human industry and the natural processes, all right? And so we view materials and these inputs as nutrients that go into these processes, and that we look at how those nutrients are accumulating in our natural world, okay, in an unhealthy or safe. We want them to be safely and healthily metabolized, all these nutrients, so that it's a closed loop system, and that we eliminate waste, all right? And so the idea, there were a lot of industry examples on this. So it looks at, again, the human process and the natural process. So the human process is we're trying to drive, we're building, but how does it fit with the natural process when we build our roads? What is our interface between the roads? What are the nutrients that we're putting in to build the roads, and where are those nutrients going? And by nutrients, I mean any kind of material, whether they're chemicals, toxic chemicals or good chemicals. We're looking at where all of those things go and how do we eliminate waste. All right, and so it's much more of a, rather than a life cycle assessment. You guys know what life cycle assessment is? Right, okay, so in life cycle assessment, what are you trying to do?
Measure the impact and then find a way to reduce the impacts.
Right, so you're measuring, you're sort of like quantifying maybe the amount of carbon you're producing throughout the life cycle, not just in the part of the process in which you have control, but you're looking up and downstream on where there's a going. Okay, and so it's normally to minimize. All right, so whereas this cradle to cradle is to eliminate. Okay, so change what we're doing or change why we're doing it. All right, so, which is a big challenge. All right, and so the, in a cradle to cradle thinking, being less bad isn't good enough. Okay, whereas in a life cycle assessment, we normally, being less bad is better than the way we were. All right, and so this is rethinking all the parts. All right, which is something that I'm throwing out for the pavement management people. So a good transportation plan not only does, minimizes the cost and maximizes safety and so on, but also can contribute to improving both the environment and the social well-being. All right, yeah.
I think that one of the main things you have to consider is economics here. Some of this waste is driven by the fact that it's more economical to have the waste than to try to.
Thank you. Okay, and I'm getting there. All right. So that absolutely right. So this is changing the way you're thinking about waste, and so you're also not only the economic, minimizing economic, and we always do the safety, but it's the environment and the social well-being is all that has to go into this equation. All right, and that's going to be the challenge that's coming around the pike. All right, in the way we do the infrastructure, because we have such a huge impact on the environment from our transportation system. It's going to fall on the transportation system to deal with some of this, and it's non-point source. Okay, it's not like you put a scrubber on a, exhaust tower. So I want to throw in a couple other concepts. So this concept between eco-efficiency versus eco-effectiveness. So this is our eco-efficiency is very much like what we've been doing already is just sort of like traditional ideas of reducing negative impacts. So we would say, and even all the demonstrations we saw yesterday, so on some of the ones that, the dust and stuff, we have to collect that dust. We've got to have a way to dispose it. With the brusher system and some different things, we have some equipment and material that have a finite use and life, and we're going to have to figure out what to do with the rest of these parts and these materials and these things that we're using to maintain the road. So those are all the wastes that we're producing. The eco-effectiveness is not only reducing the negative impacts, but actually increasing positive stuff. And so some of the things that, how do we engage the roadway? How do we make use of ecosystem processes? So you know what ecosystem processes are? So we have a bunch of them. We get light from the ecosystem, so we get heat from the ecosystem. The ecosystem does water purification for us. Okay, so there's a lot of things that the ecosystem does for us. Photosynthesis, and some of them are there are various ways to categorize them. I'm not going to go into that. But so the idea is, how do we use these eco-effectiveness, which is really where we're also increasing the positive. Okay, and we got to do this. All right, and what was it somebody was saying in one of the earlier sessions, that it was really hard to get people interested in transportation and sort of road building and all this stuff. This is a challenge. Okay, for the younger generation, and they love this kind of challenges. This is huge. So the way we present it is really not that, it is great that we're building roads and things like that, but it's also a big challenge on how we're going to do this without continuing to destroy the planet. And so the millennial generation, there are more of us now than there are baby boomers, okay? And they're motivated by other things than just money. Okay, they move from job to job. They're very interested in making an impact. Okay, and they're really worried about the environment. Okay, my daughter at 3rd grade went to see the dump. Okay, she said, we got to go to the dump today. All right, so they see this stuff. The teachers have done a great job in making young people very much environmentally aware. And I don't know, you probably noticed that in your own children and your own grandchildren. They follow me around, turn the lights off, okay, rather than the other way around. All right, so at any rate, so the point on that is it's coming, and we got people who want to do this and people who value this. All right, so the other thing to say that I want to point out on why I think this is relevant and something you need to pay attention to is because it's pretty known that a lot of change trickles up, not down. And our elected officials are going to sort of do what we want them to do, all right? That's the idea, all right? So that they're much better followers than leaders, all right? So they'll look at the trend and some scientific evidence and what people want and what the values are. And it's also that some of the other points there are showing that it's more a localized thing that trickles up. And so local communities are more likely to do these, to enact legislation or enact rules much more than the feds will, okay? So, and a few examples, the cities who've signed an agreement to reduce emissions, that California has some of their cap and trade plans. They went on and implemented some of that. So the idea is that some of this change is going to start at the grassroots and move up. All right, so how do we really get to that? All right, with all that background I told you. So here's my little plan, okay? Is that we got to do this culture of sustainability. All right? So this being eco-effective, to me, really evokes this need to create this culture of sustainability. And there's a precedence, all right, in transportation. Just as the culture of safety significantly changed what we do in transportation and how we build, how we maintain, and what's important, then I think that this culture of sustainability is going to do the same thing. That this is coming, and we're going to have to pay attention to this. And I'm going to give you a couple more reasons why. So despite, and when the culture of safety came, despite all the moaning and groaning, all right, about how if we had to do all this safety stuff, that it would sort of ruin our, it would stifle economic growth, all right, but it didn't happen, all right? So the other thing I want to tell you, well, it didn't happen for the first federal laws that required, wait a minute, okay. When did we start requiring seatbelts in vehicles? Does anybody remember? 68, okay, close, okay. When did we start actually making people wear them? What did you say? 85? 84, okay, was the first state, okay, that passed a law requiring people to wear them. Okay, 68, we put them in the vehicles. It wasn't until 84 that we actually did it. So my point is that the progress on this is going to be probably intergenerational. All right, so we're going to develop these things. So, and not only this, when we think about this development of the culture of safety, okay, we did that, it took a while, but then came the child safety seats, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, okay, and even more recently, and the automobile crash and safety ratings, okay, and then even more recently, the graduated driver's license for kids, all right. So the point is that all of these things took a while. So this isn't going to be overnight, all right? But I think we have to recognize that we're going to have to develop this culture of sustainability, and that it's going to have, that it is possible, okay, because we did it with culture of safety. When we first started DOT agencies, it was build the roads, okay? And then we found out that we had this human impact, and then we started addressing that. I think we're now at the point where we're going to start recognizing this human impact of our transportation system on our environment, and we're going to have to change to a culture, to have more of a culture of sustainability in what we do in the agencies, and that that we're going to dispel the concerns about the cost. The same thing happened with the air quality. Okay, when we did the Air Quality Act, okay, that made that all the cars had to be more fuel efficient. We had to put the catalytic converters, change the formulation of the fuels, and that was when, oh my gosh, the auto industry, the fueling, everybody, this is going to kill us. We're going to, this is going to be an economic disaster for the country. So all the moaning and groaning and stuff, well, can you imagine if we didn't do it? What it would be like on our highways if we didn't do that? All right, and we haven't crashed. I mean, the world hasn't come to an end, or we are still a world power. So the point is that there are concerns about cost, but we have to do it. We don't have any choice. Intergenerational effort, and that the outcome is that we're going to make transportation work in sync with people and nature. Just like we went with the safety, we made our transportation work in sync with people. All right, how we have to take care of people. So that's I'm convinced myself that this is possible. All right, and I'm going to tell you why I've convinced myself. So the other thing, I'm just going to warn you. All right, now you're having this engineer tell you about existentialism. Okay, so, all right, I'm going to do my best, okay, about this. So really the idea, this Claire Graves theory in the 1970s was really that human nature's not static, all right, that it's not finite, that we can change as we change with the conditions of our existence. All right, and so you see this One of the phenomena like this is that, younger people moving back to urban areas, that they've decided it's miserable with all this commuting, trying to commute. So they've changed the expectations of their existence to fit with their environment. All right, so people starting to move back to the city because we don't want to commute anymore. And so so the idea is that we can change our psychology and all those rules, and we do it all the time to adapt to new conditions. All right, that's just what people do. There is an administrative challenge on this, that when I said it's like a bubbling up. All right, but at the top, the issues will be that assume we can measure our sustainability, and how would we institutionalize it? All right, and how do we change our beliefs and norms and behaviors? And so I'll focus on some of the administrative actors at this time. So thinking about the practical setting that we're in, we have the DOT has 5 strategic goals: safety, state of good repair, economic competitiveness, livable communities, and then this environmental sustainability. Well, the first 3 of them, okay, have become sort of these known and accepted functions of a transportation agency. All right, certainly the state of good repair, building the roads and maintaining them. And I told you about the culture of safety. We introduced that, and that became a major function of agencies. Okay, and economic development has also been a recognized function. But the other 2, or I guess I said the last 3, but because I had some. All right, for the last 2, livable communities and environmental sustainability, those have not been traditional functions of an agency. Okay, so if you ask me how to measure that, and you ask the administrators how to measure that, that's a big challenge. What does that mean? How do we measure that? We don't do that. Some of the challenges, when I talk to my colleagues from public policy, then some of the challenges on this is sort of that because you can look at multiple programs, all right, so it's, again, how do we measure this? How do we know what we're doing? Okay, then we can look at multiple programs. They can agree on the data, but there's ambiguity and sensitivity or subjectivity. So, and I just got the 5-minute warning, so I want to get through this. All right, so a couple of things I want to leave you with, though, is the culture of sustainability, some of the challenges for highway maintenance, culture of sustainability and decision-making process. And so how do we align the decisions with the dollars? If you haven't read this Beyond Traffic 2045, which looks into the future, I would suggest you do it. Weak sustainability, strong sustainability. Has anybody heard of these? Okay, so we already know triple bottom line. Everybody's heard of that? Okay, so the triple bottom line is where we're quantifying ecosystem and economics and social. Okay, you're looking at all 3 of those. All right, in the weak sustainability, and what we do a lot in our decision making is that we will allow a trade-off of the economic benefits for an environmental benefit or a social benefit. And we've done that when we built the interstate. We cut up neighborhoods. We build the interstate, we're causing pollution. All right, so in a strong sustainability, which is what is going to be the pressure, is that you can't trade one of those some of that capital for another type. You have to conserve economic capital, social capital, environmental capital. We can't make a trade-off. And that's the strong sustainability, and that's a big challenge. All right, and that's part of what environmental economics does that. So the second one that I want to say is how will the culture of sustainability benefit public health? And I'm going to go through this really quick, but this scares me. All right, and that is that we understand a lot of these a lot of the impacts of air quality, okay? And we've learned to control that. I showed you some of the stuff. But surprisingly, there's a lot of low inhalation exposures that have significant health, impact on health, all right? And we don't really even understand them. And a lot of those are then, we think, are tied to road dust, tire dust, brake dust, not the stuff that we've controlled. We've got rid of that, but now we have another whole layer of air quality issues that are causing respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases. Let me give you one example. Lung transplants, okay? The medical community has evidence now that people who get a lung transplant and they live in a place where the air quality is bad are more likely to reject their lungs. All right? And the key issues here are really that there's all of this other kind of road dust that's out there that we know is carcinogenic, that is running off and going into the water system. It's kicking up, it gets resuspended. It was scaring me when I saw the guy, you know, with air hose and all that dust is kicking up again, and he's breathing this. You know, that this is going to be a big problem. And the when you look at this, it's the motorist who has the biggest impacts. So there's several other ones here that I don't have time to go into. Downcycling versus upcycling. So if you're going to use whatever you scraped off the highway and throw it as a backfill on a retaining wall, that is downcycling. All right, you are not using the value of all the materials that were in that original. The ecosystem services, I already talked about that. And then our connected vehicles, and what is the benefit or the cost of that. So the summary, okay, the things that I've covered: Anthropocene, that sustainability is inevitable, that this culture of sustainability is something that we're going to see, that highway air pollution contributes more to diseases that are not yet recognized, all right? And that this cradle-to-cradle thinking is going to influence us. We're going to have to become eco-effective, not eco-efficient. We're going to have to adopt these strong sustainability practices, and we're going to have to make decisions that preserve our sources and our resources in both environmental, social, and economic capital. So when we decide to redo our highway, we're going to be looking at preserving capital, not just our economic capital, not just our infrastructure capital. And I don't know how we're going to do that, but it's going to happen. And that's the end. Sorry that I went a little over.
No, you're all right. You're all right.
Thank you.
Interesting philosophies. Like you say, I think the
Come and talk.
safety was definitely a good analogy on that, because I grew up through that era of no seat belts, and then suddenly you wouldn't get in a car without them. And certainly in our state, we have most fatalities are attributable to lack of seatbelt wearing. So short or long is, it's an evolution in progress, and it doesn't happen overnight. Do we have any questions?
Teresa, on the area of pavement preservation, how would you characterize it as affecting disadvantaged societies?
Very good. Okay. So I think that as we make decisions about the pavement preservation, in particular when we think about some of the health impacts, that we have to be careful that we're not sort of exposing disadvantaged groups to unhealthy situations, all right? So which is what we've done in the past, in where we've made priorities based on sometimes on density of population, and sometimes, unfortunately, on where the tax bases are. And so we've done this in the past, sort of the environmental justice ideas. And I think that pavement preservation, particularly as you go on into the future and you start thinking about how we do pavement preservation, that we're going to maintain this sustainability, is that we make sure and that we're doing that across all peoples. I think that there's a very good tendency to provide those services for some groups and not the others. And I think, and then this exposure, this exposure tends to be disadvantaged groups that are more likely to be exposed to some of these toxins and unhealthy situations. So the idea is a healthy environment, and that has to be for everybody. And I think you're going to find that when we start to challenge this. That's a very good question. There's another one over there. Unless you want.
No, the comment is, I found it very hard to change my paradigm as I'm listening to the lecture, but I keep thinking of, for example, a role of preservation and ideas of how we might expand the concept. So let's say you move to automated or connected vehicles or other ways of moving around where the loading demands are less. And then my question is, like, is something like pavement preservation, can you see it as, for example, at lower condition levels, being able to repurpose it for another traffic mode or something with lower loads where we could still preserve the riding integrity of a pavement structure? Is that the kind of thinking you're thinking about? Or is it way beyond that?
No, I think that's a good thinking. So it's all open, all right? And I don't expect you to get this right away. This is sort of more the thing where you sleep on it and then you start seeing some of these buzzwords and read them and start to adopt this. So this is not an easy, it's really not that easy, all right, to get there. But the big challenge is that it's inevitable. It's inevitable. We're going to start finding out more and more about what we're doing to the planet. And the younger generation aren't going to put up with it. All right, they're going to force the change, and so we have to lead the way. We have to start. And your idea is a good one. Obviously, the connected vehicles will reduce our demand for infrastructure. All right, it'll reduce our consumption of raw materials. If you think about it, how many vehicles are out there? All you guys have vehicles, at least one or two. They're sitting there somewhere, not being used, right? You've gobbled up all these resources, space, okay, all the parking space, all right, and the paved surfaces and so on that we don't need to do. So maybe our pavement preservation will be able to afford it. If we can adopt some of these sustainability practices, we may not have to maintain so much pavement. We could change the way we're doing it. So this is just the ideas that are out there, floating out there, and this is the stuff that's going to start coming up as we start to, this environmental thing goes. So anyway, all right.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Adams.
All right.